Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today, September 1st. This year has just flown by. Anyway, today's upload is an encounter that has really haunted me for quite a long time. Before we get into it, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative and exciting uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. And please, folks, leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And they definitely do matter now, everyone. I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload. Shall we? In the first week of May 2020, I had an encounter that I'm still having problems coming to terms with. Due to reasons I will explain in this experience, I am not comfortable with giving my name or the details of exactly where this happened. I'm a pretty normal guy living in Delaware on the border of southeastern Pennsylvania. I'm a lover of the outdoors, and in the past few years I have not had the time to get out into nature and get my much needed dose of the natural world. 2019, I opened my own online business, and due to the recent COVID-19 pandemic, the whole world being stuck at home on their computers, my sales tripled the first half of this year. I have 2 children who are now very reasonable and trustworthy teenagers. My girlfriend works at the local hospital and is considered an essential worker. So the pandemic has kept her very busy this year. I turned 40 this year, and for the first time in my adult life, I had some time on my hands, and I was itching to get away from civilization. I have an internet hotspot router built into my SUV that works almost anywhere, no matter how remote. So with a laptop, I figured I could work from the road and take a few days, go fishing, and breathe some fresh air. Neither of my teenagers were interested in joining me, and like I said, my girlfriend was far too busy with work. So I took my best friend with me, a 120-pound pit bull lab mix named Pete. He makes a great camping dog because he's incredibly lazy, and I never have to worry about him running off to chase deer or anything. He will lay on his blanket next to the fire all day and night, unless I make him head out with me. But as I've learned while camping with Pete, if coyotes, bears, or any other predators come around, he snaps out of his laziness and protects the camp. Despite his easygoing demeanor, Pete is pretty intimidating, as he's 120 pounds of muscle with no fat, which always blows my mind because of how lazy and inactive he is. I try to go camping at least once a year, and when I do, I usually rough it with a small tent and whatever I can carry on my back. But this time, I decided that I wanted to have as much comforts of home and really pamper myself. So I hitched my 10-foot enclosed cargo trailer to my very large SUV, filled it with all of the things I would want to really be comfy. I brought my full-size backyard grill, a 12x12 pop-up canopy, an air mattress, 2 large coolers full of food, and fancy 6-person tent. My campground I decided to go to is a large one that is mostly used by RV kind of crowd, but on the far end, right next to the best fishing area, they have about a half a dozen of just plain old campsites with no power or water hookups. My campsite was bordered by about 50 yards of thick woods that separated my camp from a large, fast-moving stream that is well known to be one of the best trout fishing spots in the whole state. On the other side of the stream is a steep mountainside that is covered in rock overhangs and small caves. It is a beautiful area, and I love falling asleep to the sound of water. I set up the camp so that my SUV, trailer, and pop-up canopy make sort of a U shape and block most of the view into my area from the rest of the campers. I rented my campsite for a full week starting on Friday, May 1st, which was the first day that the state opened up the state parks and campgrounds to the public since the pandemic shutdown in March. I arrived at the campground about midday on Friday, and the place was packed. I spent most of the day getting my campsite set up, getting to know my temporary neighbors, and cooking ribeye steaks, burgers, and vegetables on the grill. The weather in central Pennsylvania in early May is pretty much perfect, so I decided to sleep in the tent each night with Pete and turned my trailer into my mobile office where I kept my computer, internet goods, mailing packages, and even a printer for printing postage. This way I could work for an hour or so each morning, get my orders packed up, and drive 20 minutes into the nearest town once every few days and get my orders shipped out. I remember thinking that I wish I could convince my girlfriend and kids to sell everything and just move into the woods and live just like this. The weekend was crazy busy at the campground, and the creek was lined with fishermen as far as the eye could see. So I decided to do some hiking and exploring into the surrounding wilderness with Pete instead of fighting 10 people for one same fish all day. It felt great to get out to where I belonged, the woods. The only negative was that it rained on and off all weekend while I was hiking, but to be honest, when you camp in Pennsylvania, you should expect to get rained on regularly. On the afternoon of Sunday, May 3rd, the campground cleared out fast, and by sundown there were only a few active campsites left. I had gotten to know the two guys in the campsite directly next to mine, and we hung out a few hours a night, while I drank some hot tea and they smoked joints like they were cigarettes. Needless to say, they were always hungry and seemed pleased to have me next door with my full-size grill and enough food to feed a small army. For the next few days, I worked online, fished the creek, explored the mountains of the area on foot with my pup. We also liked to just walk the campground itself and stop and talk with the scattered campers who were there during the weekday. On Tuesday afternoon, a few of them told me about a black bear who had made its way into a more accessible side of the campground and raided their camps the night before. This had me a little concerned because I had a full-sized grill sitting out in the open at my campsite that had been cooking delicious food for days on end. I debated putting the grill inside of my enclosed trailer at night, but laziness got the best of me and I left it out. Central Pennsylvania has a rather large black bear population, and I was already aware of this. So at night I slept with a Mossberg Maverick 88 12-gauge shotgun loaded with double-aught buck in the tent with Pete, just in case a rogue bear posed a danger to us. I had forgotten to pack my Ruger Red Hawk 44 Magnum for hiking, so while out in the woods I had to rely on my S&W Shield 45 ACP that I already had on my hip when we left home. It's not ideal, but I figured, hey, it's better than nothing. On the night of Tuesday, May 5th, my new friends and I cooked up some barbecued chicken thighs, baked beans, and baked some potato wrapped in aluminum foil in my fire pit. They produced a small bottle of vodka as well, and we made a few orange soda spiked drinks to go along with our fancy campsite dinner. All the food and drinks combined with too much fun had worn us all out a little early, so we parted ways and got ourselves prepared to crash for the night. A night that would prove to be the most terrifying night of our lives. At about 10 p.m., I loaded 4 shells of buck into my shotgun, got my tent all squared away, and lied down in the tent with my dog next to me on his bed in a blanket. I put some Citizens Journalist news on my phone and put one headphone in my right ear, and kept my left ear clear to listen to my surroundings and enjoy the sounds of nature. My tent was pitched close to the tree line with the rear of the tent facing the woods. The noise of the frogs and insects at night was super loud, and is kind of a song that puts me to sleep better than any lullaby ever could. The next thing I remember is waking up to my eyes popping open to some kind of howl metallic noise outside of my campsite. I lie there perfectly still with my heart slamming from the quick spike of adrenaline that flooded my veins. Then bang! I heard the lid on my grill slam shut. I had stuck a fairly bright solar-powered motion light on the side of my trailer that lit up my small U-shaped courtyard area of vehicles and tents. My tent was facing the open part of the U, and I could see that my motion light was on, and someone or something was moving around my camp, casting shadows as it went. I looked at Pete to my right, and he was still lying down, but his head was up, and his eyes were as big as ping-pong balls. He was clearly hearing what I was hearing, but I found it strange that he was silent. It was then that I noticed the usual deafening noise of frogs and insects in the woods behind me was not there. Then I heard whatever it was breathing. It was a hoarse, deep breathing, and that was when I thought to myself, bear. I could hear it walking around, thump, 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 and next I heard it at my trailer, pulling at the side door, trying to get inside. So I sat up and grabbed my shotgun. One thing about black bears is that they are not the bravest animals, and any man-made noise will almost always make them run for their lives. So I racked the slide of my shotgun as loud as I could and chambered a shell. Instead of running off, the creature stopped moving and went silent. I could feel the fear building up inside of me as I pretty much held my breath and listened. And to my horror, it started walking toward my tent. It was then that I saw its shadow take shape as it drew closer. It was on 2 feet and apparently huge. I sat there in terror and disbelief as it came right up to the front of my tent, breathing like a giant monster. I said out loud, "Whoever you are, I have a 12 gauge pointed right at you, so you better sound off who you are." Right then it leaned forward right up to my tent and let out the most terrifying deep growl I had ever heard in my life. At that moment, Pete whined softly and cowered his head down. It was then that the shadow of its head was clearly visible. It had a giant head of a wolf with 2 pointed ears. As it growled at me, I could hear my neighbors talking to each other, and one of them shined a flashlight at the creature. When the light hit the side of the creature's face, I saw the eyes light up like golden LED lights. It turned its face toward the flashlight, and I could hear the man gasp and say, "Holy shit." Then it turned its attention back to me and growled again. I decided that if I didn't do something, this thing was going to kill us. So I lied back onto my sleeping pad, took aim at the shadow of this monster's head, and pulled the trigger. What followed was complete and total pandemonium. The monster screamed and roared at the same time. It was like the death scream of a woman mixed with the roar of a large lion. Pete finally snapped out of his fear, jumped up, and started barking ferociously. The thing ran off, and from what I could tell from the loud thump, it ran straight into my trailer. I clambered up and quickly unzipped my tent and poked my head outside to see. It got up on its feet and then ran right into the picnic table and did a flip onto the ground. It started grabbing its face and thrashing around. I could see that there was blood everywhere on the trailer. I jumped out of the tent while chambering another shell. I aimed as best as I could with my whole body shaking violently, and right as it started to get up again, I shot it for a second time. I'm not entirely sure that I hit it with the second shot. It stood straight up and I pumped the gun and shot again. The third shot dropped it again. I was so terrified and taken back at how tall it was when it stood up that I tripped over my own feet and fell backwards. Just then I heard more gunfire erupt behind me and turned to see my neighbor unloading a large revolver into this werewolf-looking thing at maybe 20 yards. The creature was on its side and was kind of running in circles on the ground, gargling and spraying blood from its face and neck as it gasped. As it's doing its death spiral on the ground, it was moving closer to me. I tried to pump the gun again and was shaking so bad that it took 3 attempts. Before the last shell chambered, I just pointed and shot without aiming, and I could see the hump on its back of its neck rip open and spray blood and flesh all over the place. I was really close at this point. The monster stopped flipping out, and its limbs were twitching while its head remained fully animated, flopping back and forth for at least another 10 seconds. I crawled quickly backwards away from it and tried to stand up. I realized once I stood up that I'd been holding my breath that whole time. And when I got to my feet, my vision started to go black and I fell over again. My new friend ran up and grabbed my arms and started to pull me hard backwards away from the monster. I stood up shaking badly and looked at the guy with the revolver. His eyes were huge and full of terror. When I started looking around, there were at least another 5 people showing up there with the same wild-eyed expression. I saw at least 3 of them had come with guns. People were yelling and asking each other what happened and checking to see if I was injured because I had blood on my clothes and my face. It all happened quickly, but as it often told by people facing traumatic events, it seemed like it was in slow motion to me. My dog was still barking ferociously and going crazy, so I did my best to calm him down. When I hugged him, he was shaking as much as I was. Before long, a small crowd had formed, and people were on their phones calling 911. After a minute or so, a few guys and myself approached this thing as it lay there, still occasionally twitching. We all stood over saying, WTF over and over. Eventually, we all started saying, it's a werewolf, in disbelief. All at once, people all started taking pics with their phones. Mine still in the tent. The wolf man was dead. The top half of its head was basically gone, including both of its eyes and the top of its snout. I assume that was the first shot I made from the tent. The front of its neck was completely shredded, and the back of its neck was missing a large chunk of meat. Other than that, it was pretty much impossible to see exactly what other injuries it had sustained, as it was completely covered from head to toe in blood. But we were all pretty sure it had taken buckshot or 357 mags to the chest as well. There was a small river of blood running through the camp and right past my tent from the puddle that surrounded the beast. It was a lot of blood. It was on its side, and after a few minutes we summoned the courage to grab some big sticks and flip it onto its back. It most definitely was a male, as it had a huge set of balls bigger than my fists. It was huge. We never measured it, but it was longer than any man I'd ever seen. It had a dog-like leg, weird-shaped paws with kind of small heels for feet. Looking back, I'm impressed that it was able to balance such a big body on feet so small. It had really skinny lower legs and pretty thick uppers. It had arms pretty much like a human with long fingers that had filthy-looking claws maybe 3 to 4 inches long. I noticed it was missing the top half of a finger from the battle. Then the second wave of terror hit us all at once. The howling of multiple animals sounded off in the direction of the mountain behind the creek. We all looked at each other, and I could see that same big-eyed look go over everyone else's face. I ran to my tent and clumsily loaded my shotgun with full 5 rounds this time and grabbed my .45 as well and clipped it to my side inside of my waistband. I also grabbed my phone. All of a sudden, everyone was done looking at the werewolf and was looking into the woods in the direction of the howling. It kept up for a few minutes, and we could hear the howling getting further and further away. The police, game wardens, and paramedics showed up all at once. I could see from the flashing lights that they had blocked the entrance to the campground up the hill off to the distance. The cops were just as surprised and freaked out as we were when they first saw the creature. The 2 game wardens looked worried and not surprised. They told everyone not to take any pictures and made everyone clear the general area. The wardens were both on their phones almost the whole time from then on. The paramedics cleared everyone and tried to get me to agree to go to the hospital and get checked out, but I refused. The only injury I had was my hearing, as I was half deaf for a few days from all of the gunfire and noise. The paramedics were also very silent and looking worried, much like the game wardens. The police took my shotgun and the revolver from the neighbor. They let me keep my .45. They made everyone else put their guns away, and anyone who was there was rounded up for questioning. Everyone was told to stay off their phones, which was not much of a problem as only a few people's phones got signal at the campground. When I asked the game wardens what the hell this thing was, they told me they didn't know. But it looks like some kind of mutant bear or large canine. A few hours later, an SUV full of guys showed up. They were all carrying large Glocks and dressed in cargo pants and tees. They immediately took me and the others who were involved aside and began questioning us. They told me that they were federal fish and game. They were very interested in the howling we had heard after the battle occurred. They must have asked me 10 times about where it was and how close it sounded and what it sounded like, etc. They also repeated to me 10 times that I was not to tell anyone what happened, and that they would get to the bottom of things, find out what I had encountered. They told me to tell anyone who asked about my trailer that I had to shoot an aggressive black bear. I assumed they told my neighbor and anyone else who was on the scene the same thing. They made us open our phones and go through our phones and delete the pictures we had taken at that time. They also told me that if any pictures were to come out of this creature, that it would spell trouble for anyone who has them. They threatened me with all kinds of trouble if this got out. They did not try and pretend that I was seeing things. They just point blank and politely asked me not to talk about it and to lie about the trailer damage. It would seem that I was asleep for only about 2 hours before this Dogman showed up. By about 4 a.m., the officials had already gotten to everyone in the campground, and I assumed the other people were told it was a bear and made to pack up and get ready to go. They said it wasn't safe, and they had to close the campground until they were sure it was safe. After the Dogman was bagged and tagged, a small fire truck was brought in, and all of the blood was hosed off of my trailer, vehicle, and tables, and everything else, and the blood on the ground was hosed into the woods behind my tent. Then a few guys wiped down my trailer and vehicle with soapy water and hosed them off again. Regular old duct tape was put over the holes in my trailer, and they took my tent, bloody clothes, bloody slippers as evidence along with my shotgun. Right before I left, they gave me my shotgun back, wiped down and unloaded. They told me to fill my tank at the closest town and drive straight home without stopping. They repeated this 3 times to me. Since all of this, I have learned everything I can about what I encountered. I listened to Dogman and Wolfman encounter stories day and night, and that is how I came across your channel. I figured I would reach out to you. I am amazed that the authorities are able to keep such a noisy event with so many witnesses under wraps. I've been searching for anyone who came forward or anything about the campground closing in the news. Nothing. I'm not interested in putting myself out there any more than just this for now. I'm almost as scared of the agents as I am of these Dogman creatures. But all in all, they seem genuinely concerned for my well-being. So after I uploaded this about 2 years ago, a couple days later, I received another email from this subscriber. Hey Jeff, I was reading through the comments of the show the other day of my experience. A few people had questions, it seems. No, none of the guys in the Denali had long guns, just large Glocks. I asked the older Southern guy what kind it was, and he said a Glock 20 10mm. I really didn't give all that much detail in the description of the monster looking back in the email to you. The dead Dogman smelled horrible, like a combination of a barnyard animal mixed with strong dog piss. Also, it did have a tail, a small tail, maybe 2 feet at the longest. The Dogman was dark brown all over. Oddly enough, I do remember that. It had some lighter brown stripes on its arms, where the blood wasn't totally soaked in the upper arm area. It was fluffy with fur, not the sparse, hairy thing I hear others talking about in their encounters. This one was fully covered in fur like an actual dog, even its arms and legs. But when it stood up in front of me, it did seem to have some white in the middle of its chest. I could be wrong because I only saw it that way for a second or so. The next time I saw its chest, it was completely covered in blood. The skin on the tip of its snout and under its bottom jaw were both sheared off by the buckshot, but its teeth were undamaged. As it lay there, it had its mouth open, and its teeth were very weird. All of them were pointed, and they seemed like they would fit together like a shark's tooth or alligator. The teeth were bloody, but very visible. They seemed unnatural to me. My college major involved the study of teeth and fossils, so I have a good understanding of tooth structure and which type of teeth are designed for what. And it would seem that its teeth would only be useful for biting large chunks of flesh off to be swallowed whole, like a shark or an alligator. They were not reminiscent of normal canine teeth in any way. After listening to hundreds of encounters the past few months, a common theme is that they seem to like the softer inner organs of their prey, while often leaving the meat behind. I wonder if it's because they swallow their food in large chunks, and obviously, softer organs would be much easier than dealing with bone and tougher muscle. Just a thought. This is going to sound a bit silly, but I gotta say it. There was a feeling of something supernatural from the beginning. I can't describe it, but the feeling of something supernatural was even in the air when I thought it was a bear. It's like everything felt wrong and reality had ceased to exist for that moment. How would every frog and insect for hundreds of yards know to be quiet? Why would the land animal like a dogman have teeth like an alligator or a shark? How did it keep flipping out and running around with its brains falling out of the top of its head? The very air around me felt like it had a weird charge. I feel like there's something important about these creatures that we just don't quite understand, something supernatural. Give me some time. I will get a Skype number together this week or next and give you a call. What's a good day and time for you usually? Next email. I trust that you're a good person and all, but I fear that they may be watching you due to your other uploads of yours I have listened to with that guy named Victor. I find it interesting that the one agent that really had me cornered for a while that night had a thick southern accent. I suppose he may have come from the Virginia group. I will see if I can put together an online phone number and call you while on a proxy server. I am sorry for the paranoia, but my life has been going really well with the exception of my encounter. I'm terrified of those guys, the agents, messing up my life. I can't afford things to go sideways for my family and myself right now. My state of mind is pretty jumpy these days. I won't even take the trash cans out without a big revolver. If I do get a setup together, I'll call you. What's the best time? If you have any questions in the meanwhile, go ahead and email me. I'll make sure to check this account for you each day. Our next correspondence. No worries. I figured you'd have some questions for me when I emailed you my experience the first place. Like I said, I will be checking this email each day for you. Next correspondence. I've been having weird things going on. Someone's been calling my phone from a different international number and hanging up on me after 10 seconds of silence. I can tell it's a landline by the noise it makes when they hang up. It also lets me know that it's an actual person and not a robocall. A black SUV with a guy who wears a headset with a microphone has been outside of my home in the early mornings. He leaves right before 6:30, right about the beginning of rush hour. Yesterday, a white Range Rover pulled into my driveway in the middle of the day. I happened to be working in my kitchen when it happened, so I was facing the window when they pulled up. I saw two guys in the vehicle sitting there scanning my house and talking to each other. I always carry a gun with me now, even when I'm home alone with the kids. So I popped the button on my holster securing strap and went to the front door and quickly opened it. The two guys looked at me and casually pulled out of my driveway. I did notice that they had an out-of-state license plate because it was just plain white. Definitely not Delaware. I'm sorry for this, Jeff, but I'm going to have to stop corresponding for a while. I can't help but to notice that this stuff started happening when I contacted you. I could just be paranoid, but like I told you previously, I have a happy and almost perfect life now. I have a lot to lose. I hope you understand. Feel free and let your listeners know. So I let a year go by and I said, "Hey, it's Jeff Nadolny. How are you? I'm reaching out to make sure you're okay. I'd love to speak with you sometime. And of course, I'll honor your stipulations." He responded, "I'm fine. I have not been seeing anything weird or had any of the men in black types watching me for a while now. I have made up my mind to not do any kind of interviews or talk directly with anyone for their safety as well as my own. I am still shocked that none of those pictures taken that night slipped through the cracks and came online. I've made up my mind to just send the encounter story to numerous cryptid channels to give it more exposure to your peers and their listeners. I have to think that more than one of these people there that night would have gone online looking to see if this story has made it into the world beyond our campsite experience. If so, I'm hoping that someone with more balls than me found a way to hide a few pics or a few minutes of video from these guys in the SUV and will anonymously leak them out somehow. Thanks for doing your part to spread the word of my encounter as well as many others. If I had not had the experience that I did, I certainly would have looked at stories like those on your channel to be ridiculous. But I would imagine that with real-life monsters roaming into populated campsites and neighborhoods that the government would indeed have to have some kind of task force to deal with them. Don't worry about me, I'm fine, and let's hope someone else has a few pics that they can break this thing wide open." All right, folks, this encounter has stuck with me for a very long time. It literally stays in the back of my head, and probably every couple of weeks I wonder about the gentleman who had the experience. Now, he initially reached out to me first, a couple of months after his experience. So it's been about 3 years now. And after he shared it with me, after he had typed it out, I printed it, read it, blown away. I instantly narrated it. Then I kept getting updates from the gentleman, and he kind of stopped. Then, out of the blue, I talked with him, and he said, "Hey, I don't know, how you feel about this, but I'm going to share this on a couple other channels and on Reddit. I really hope that somebody at that campground was able to sneak a photo out of there. I don't know who these people are. I don't know how to contact them, but I really hope that by me sharing this experience on different platforms, do you mind?" And I'm like, this is your encounter. This is something that you need to do to make you feel whole again. Go ahead. I don't own your encounter, my friend. But it literally has stuck with me. And I really do think about the gentleman. And I hope that he is okay. I hope that mentally he's doing well. I periodically have a flash of my encounter, but his is, I don't have another word except PTSD causing experience. He could have lost his life. He was inches from losing his life. And by the grace of God, did not. So, it's just an encounter that I will share periodically because to me, it really does show how dangerous these things really are and how dangerous our government really is. And with that, I hope you enjoyed listening to this experience. I hope you guys can get some sort of information, a puzzle piece, so to say. But guys, your support is what makes this channel continue to grow and go and be special. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Please keep an eye on your pets, your children, your loved ones, your friends. And God bless you all.